Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions. And today I've got with us Bud McDonald, founder of McMay Business Services. Bud, who are you and what do you do?
So, Chelsea, I spent a career in the corporate world, helping mid-sized to large businesses get their situation. I spent 35 years leading companies, improving operations, and helping businesses grow. And over the decades, managing P&Ls, large teams, and solving business challenges. I work today with small businesses trying to help them gain financial visibility and make better business decisions. And I decided to do that because spending decades watching businesses make mistakes that either they weren't aware of or should have known better, you just never know. I felt like from my experience turning businesses around, helping businesses grow, starting businesses up, I could take all of that knowledge over my 35 plus years and help small businesses not make the mistakes even mid-sized and large businesses make.
I firsthand know a lot about mistakes, especially with starting business and getting business up and running, and especially within the financial aspect of it. I tell companies all the time, you don't want me touching your finances because I don't want to touch my own finance. There are people out there that are really meant for it, that are way better at it than I am. I know my lane and I like to stick with it. So for folks that are just getting started in a company and say they're a founder and they're trying to get their business up and running, what are some things that you suggest that they think about when they're trying to get their financial system set up?
Chelsea, that's a really good question. And a lot of small business owners don't think about it. In the truest of terms, and I was a small business owner years ago and thought I had all the answers and all that. What I learned was I really didn't, but I did learn through my experience. Don't just decide to start a business. Have a vision, have a goal, understand where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow. And you have to do that through sitting down and truly putting a business plan together. It doesn't have to be 100 pages. Just sit down, put your vision, put your goal in, but where you are today, where you want to be in 30 days, where you want to be in 60 days, where you want to be in 90 days, where you want to be in 180 days, and follow that plan. Now, that plan is only as good as it was when you pushed enter, right? It's going to change.
Sure.
No doubt about it. It's going to change. With that business plan, understand what you believe you're going to spend. And that gives you a go by to know when you're off track. Some of the businesses through my career I helped were just a little bit out of whack. They just didn't have things gelling. And if you put a really solid plan together, hit this plan, budget, and a cash forecast on where you're going to be, at least for the next 12 months, it gives you something that will guide you, right?
Yeah.
And you can make the adjustments. The other thing, and what I preach and why I started my business, is a lot of business owners manage their business by their bank account, right? You know, you just can't do that. Your bank account tells you what cash you have today and tell you what you're going to have tomorrow or the next day. Do a cash forecast. Okay, you push enter, it's wrong. But you have something to go by to manage your business. So if you don't have those tools, I preach doing a 13-week cash flow.
Okay.
Why? That's about as far out as you're going to be able to forecast, right? You're not going to get any better, any further out. So that gives you about 3 months of where you think your cash is going to be. It's going to change. But if you do that regularly, you turn decisions that are reactive into decisions that are active, meaning you can think ahead, right? Oh, it's not going to be where it is next week. What do I need to do? Receivables are behind. But that brings in another problem, right? if you don't have the processes in place to manage receivables, payables, and even invoicing.
Yeah.
I took over a company probably 15 years ago that was upside down. And this is a large company. It's not a mom and pop thing. It was a large company. One of the problems they had was cash flow. And the problem was they had a major project in Australia, didn't have a contract signed, hadn't billed anything. And if memory serves, they were $10, $12 million in the hole right there. For a small business owner, you have to be more cognizant of where you are. So I think for me, and what I did when I formed McMay, and we're not a huge conglomerate, but I did exactly what I said. I sat down, wrote a business plan. My business plan was 4 or 5 pages, wasn't long, but it described what I was going to do and how I was going to do it, built a budget, and I today still do a 13-week cash flow because it gives me the information that I need to be able to manage the business. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, when you sit down and think about bookkeeping, we offer bookkeeping because that is the foundation for your financials.
Sure.
If you don't have all of your transactions booked and some semblance of reporting regularly, I prefer weekly. Some people say, monthly is good enough. It's totally up to the business owner. For a startup, I'd recommend weekly, but you need to have accurate financials because that's where it starts. If the numbers are wrong, any other planning or decisions you make, they're going to be wrong too.
Yeah. I started my company about 6 years ago now, and I started with a spreadsheet, and I quickly found that trying to keep tabs on all the invoices, all the payments, all the things that I was buying, all my expenses, everything in a spreadsheet it just became unruly very quickly. And I was really surprised. I figured Excel, it's got to be like the most exquisite tool for bookkeeping that there is. And then really quickly, this is not the truth. And there are many other tools out there that folks can leverage, that they can leverage more effectively than what you can get out of an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm curious, what kind of tools do you suggest companies use, and especially in those early days?
So I personally use QuickBooks.
Yep.
And probably going to give away my age here. The first QuickBooks version I used was version 2. And it was desktop. Now I converted to QuickBooks Online about a year ago. One, because desktop's beginning to get a little pricey, but it's pricey because of all the tools QuickBooks, but online gives me way more flexibility. I can be anywhere in the world on anybody's computer and I can get to my numbers. For desktop, you have to have your desktop, laptop, whatever it is to be able to get to it. And there's a lot of AI tools that's built in online. I use QuickBooks. I can help folks get signed up. I have a arrangement with a company, or a partnership, I guess, really, with a company that offers discounted prices. But that's not the only tool out there, right?
Sure.
From what you said, you're exactly right. Excel is a great tool. I've used Excel, probably on version 3 of Excel, but I've used Excel for everything. It's great for financial analysis. It's great. I can't even sit here and tell you how many different things I've used Excel for. But from an accounting point of view, you really need something that's a bit more robust and a bit more user-friendly. Excel is user-friendly for some things. For bookkeeping, not so much.
Not so much.
Any mistakes, right?
In terms of where we're looking at and for mistakes that people are making, you mentioned earlier that you've seen big and medium-sized companies make mistakes, and having a several $million hole to climb out of is certainly a mistake that I wouldn't want to make. But what other mistakes are you finding that the companies make?
Processes, the lack of robust process. And it's the same mistake that some small business owners. Now, when I'm talking about small businesses, $250,000 a year revenue business, you still have to have processes from a standpoint of when you invoice, how you track it. Going back to your comment on Excel, what platform you use, is it scalable? If you start a business and first year you do $250,000, next year, and I'm just going to pull a number out of my head, do $5 million the next year. You have to think about what your goal is. There's a platform out there called Wave. I sit on a board of a nonprofit and they use Wave. Good enough for them. It's very small. The nonprofit's very small and Wave is scalable. We use the free version today, but it's scalable. It's different than QuickBooks. It's not as robust as QuickBooks. Good enough for a nonprofit.
Okay.
But think about your business plan, right? Think about where you're going to be, where you are today, where you want to be in 180 days, where you want to be in 3 years, where you want to be in 5 years, and make sure you pick something that's scaled. Doesn't mean with QuickBooks, they have 4 or 5 different plans, right? But you don't have to get the biggest plan because you think in 5 years, you're going to be $5 million.
Sure.
Make sure that the platform is scalable as you grow. QuickBooks, you start out with what they call a smart or quick smart or something, remember? And then they have another one called Advanced, and they have another one called Premier, I think, and then they have Enterprise or something like that. So you can scale, you can move up as you scale. And most of the businesses that I've gone in, most of the turnarounds that I've done over my career, it's been all about not having the right processes in place or not using them.
Yeah.
You can have all the processes you want. If you don't use them, you might well not have any.
That's a hard one because I've been known to set out a couple of good processes here and there, and then it comes to following those processes and then actually doing them and making them repeatable and being more of a do as I do instead of do as I say.
Yeah.
And from the business leader's perspective, it's not always easy to just kind of, you get in a habit and you get in the way of doing something. And then it's like the process looks great and shiny, but it might take longer and it might be a little bit less streamlined to then the way that you've done it habitually. So it can be a challenge to get those processes implemented, like even at the leadership levels.
It can be. And through my career, that's one of the struggles I've had is when I've gone into a place or a company or a position or whatever that didn't have processes, is getting buy-in, right?
Yeah.
And you get buy-in through communication. You're going to make a change or you're going to add something. Yeah. Leadership's going to decision, but you have to get buy-in from levels down. And I took over a project a number of years ago. Not really where I wanted to be, but they asked me to go, so I went. And it was a major project for the company. It was for one of the major oil companies. The project manager for the oil company was not a happy camper. They were behind schedule and they only started for a month and they were already behind schedule. My boss goes, can you go in here and just add some leadership, spend a month, see if you can get it lined up? That he didn't have a clue what was. And not that I expected him to, but when I got in there, they had processes. Processes were great, weren't used to them. Their hiring methodology, non-existent. The project manager was managing the people. He wasn't out in the facility talking to other people. I spent a week going out and talking to the people in the facility and figured out that communication was the first issue that they had. People didn't have a clue why they were there. They're on a project. They know it's temporary. No, they're only going to be there for 5 months or whatever it was. But I had no clue why they were there. How they were hiring, the training was, how can I be nice here? The training was almost non-existent, right? You have to give the people some semblance of knowledge of what you expect them to do. And we shut the thing down and did some things. So my boss didn't want to, the whole company PM didn't want to, but what we saw after that, after we communicated why we were there, what we were doing, what their role was, what the benefit of what they were doing, I was even shocked. I knew it would help. I was shocked at the change. So communication and the processes to me are critical if you're struggling.
It sounds like I've got a almost 1-year-old daughter, and I find that expectations and having a routine that does include some processes
Yeah.
and communicating what we expect from her, it goes leaps and bounds for her to have that, the process of which she follows. She gets up and she gets breakfast and she gets diaper change and all the things, and she goes down for a nap at the same time regularly. And so it's not a fight, it's not a struggle. She just is ready to go and just it knows what to expect when she comes in and wakes up in the morning and comes in the kitchen. She knows I can expect breakfast to be pretty darn ready or darn close to it. And I find that even with older kids and adults, the same, having those clear expectations and having that communication, that you can facilitate those relationships that tend to be a little bit more productive than if you're just like, here, go for it, and trusting that they know what to do offhand, which not everybody does.
But you just hit it on the head, Chelsea. That is a process. Like, no matter whether it's written down or not, that is a process. And we tried to do the same thing with our kids. I've got a son and a daughter, and they're 180 degrees apart in terms of personality and things like that. The daughter learned from her big brother. In fact, we were with him for our Father's Day, and some memories came up about how she got trained by her big brother on what not to do, right? And that's implementing a process, not directly, but indirectly, right?
Yeah. And having that line of communication open so that if expectations are unclear and if things start to take a turn in the wrong direction or they start to go off the rails, you've got that ability to come to leadership and say, hey, I'm not sure what I'm doing here and I don't know what I should be doing. Can you give me some sense as to how I can go about doing my job the right way? I think that even just having those lines of communication going both ways is really important for folks that are starting companies and they seem to be somewhat successful. It still matters having that line of communication through the channels.
One thing that I've always tried to do for me, and I don't talk about it a lot, is I've always tried to learn something new every day. Right. And I had a couple of mentors in my career, and obviously sitting in leadership positions, you spend a lot of time talking to customers and you spend a lot of time talking to vendors. I found that I learned more from going out and talking to the people than I did anything else, right? And going back to this project I took over, even after we made the changes, I think it gave the people in the field, it gave them a voice, right? And we had safety issues. They would identify probably, maybe not every day, but at least every other day, I'd go out. It's all about the communication.
I think the bigger you get in a company or as the bigger the company gets to become disillusioned with the position or the way the company's going. And it's just like the bigger you get, the more you find that, okay, we must be doing great. We're growing, right? And it tends to draw folks and with folks down at that lower level. And you become disconnected from the organization. And I think having some processes in place and having some distinct lines of communication and some channels there that don't end up falling off, that they remain open and that you've got these ways, like regardless of how big you get and regardless of how much you're growing, I think that probably will help and probably helps founders stay connected to their business and the mission and how they're intending to grow it and the plan that they started out with.
Absolutely, 100%.
You mentioned something earlier that I want to touch on too, and you mentioned receivables. This has to be my least favorite topic in a very least favored topic of finance. And I think a lot of founders get surprised or they get caught off guard because it's not necessarily like somebody says, okay, you're starting a company. Now you're going to have to go hound people for the money that they owe you. And that tends to be a challenge. And it's not something that's usually considered by bookkeepers or by folks that are doing your accounting. I think it's oftentimes, it is the founder's responsibility, or at least the person who's responsible for tracking those receivables and making sure that invoices are being paid and that things are being paid on time. And that if things fall behind, that they're taking responsibility and going and getting that money that they're owed. Those are awkward conversations. Those are probably some of the most difficult conversations I've had in my business thus far is going to folks and saying, hey, you still owe us this money. We did the work for you. We need to get to a point here where you can come back to the table and pay what you owe and make it whole, and then we can part ways. But I'm curious what some suggestions that you have for folks that are constantly finding people are getting behind on their invoicing and they don't want to be tough or rude or imposing. They just want to get paid.
You're exactly right. That's a conversation that nobody wants to have. You hate going to somebody and go, you owe me $100 or you owe me 50 cents or whatever the number might be, right? It still goes back to communication, in my opinion, Chelsea, because this is probably the most important piece of the whole process. In my opinion, it starts with the bookkeeper. And maybe it's not the bookkeeper per se, maybe it is the account manager, however the business owner's got it set up. But you'd be surprised how many customers understand that the conversation is going to happen because they know they owe you, right? They know they owe you. And if you approach it or you continually communicate with them and let them know that it's outstanding, for me, it starts with the bookkeepers or whatever you want to call them. They make a call today and go, Mr. Your outstanding balance is blah, blah, blah. And then a few days later, maybe they make another call if nothing happens. And then it just goes up the chain, right? The business owner hopefully has good enough relationship with that customer to be able to have that conversation and have it in a very cordial, non-threatening way because they know they owe you the money, right? But what a business owner, especially a small business owner, needs to understand, sometimes you have to fire customers. If you get to a point that they're not paying you and there's no resolution and you're still working for them, you have to be able to make that decision. But that's the last ditch effort. Right. And I've actually had to do that a few times in my business is not getting paid, had the cordial conversation, non-threatening, and they didn't pay me. I stopped working for them. But it starts with the accounting firm. They need to have the cordial conversations and just remind them of the payable. And part of the process, though, is mailing out or emailing, however you do it, the statement so that they have the data in front of them. That's part of the process. The next part is the conversation. And if it has to go up to the owner, it goes up to the owner. Hopefully he's got that relationship where he can solve that issue, right? As a business leader in a couple of different companies that I ran, it very seldom got up to me, but it did get up to me a few times. And you have to have that conversation in a very cordial, non-threatening way. Usually you'll get paid. If they don't pay you, you need to have the gumption to fire them. You don't want to be working for somebody and not getting paid. Right?
Yeah. And that is one of the most difficult sort of conversations that I've had in my business is we are a small business too. We understand that you're a small business and we're working together and we're ultimately providing a service you have agreed to pay for that we are under signed contract for. And if you're unable to pay, let us know. Let us put it out there and work something out so that we can both be made whole by the end of it. But if you just go on ignoring the problem and end up with outstanding balances, then it just ends up ruining the relationship and making it harder to work together in the future.
It is a challenging conversation, but for a small business owner, the key for him is to make sure he's got a relationship with that customer. That is key for me. It's not just about AR and stuff like that. It's key for moving down the road because all he's got to do is make one mistake.
Right.
He has the potential to be an out, right?
Now, do you have any advice or do you work with companies to help them establish their rates or establish how much they should be charging for services or for things that they're looking at doing? I know that's oftentimes a difficult thing to come up with is how much do I charge for this? And if you look at your competitors, you're always going to find the ones that are doing the fight to the bottom and trying to just be the lowest price. And then you've got other folks that are intentionally trying to be a luxury offering. So how do folks typically then, when they're working with you, establish their rates and establish their pricing?
That's a good question. Sometimes it even gets down to being philosophical, right? Let's say it's a service company and they go out and they do something for somebody and the owner's not doing it. He has an employee that goes out and does that.
Sure.
That's pretty easy, right? Because you know what your direct costs are. You know what your overhead is. And what I've done is allocate overhead to project or the service, because I've been in a project environment, I've been in a service environment.
Sure.
And I basically did them the same way, just different numbers. The philosophical idea comes in my business. The way that I price stuff for my bookkeeping, it's not really a list, but it's a formula on what it takes to do a transaction, what it takes to balance a checkbook, what it takes to balance all of the credit card account, all of the different accounts, right? And those are all estimated. And
Sure.
I sat down and I put together what I call a price. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's basically a pricing document. And you plug the numbers at the bottom, comes out with a rate. And the way I did that is I wanted to average X dollars an hour for the work that's
Sure.
done.
Okay.
And so you do a few of those and typically you got to make some tweaks. And so it came out at the bottom where it averaged what I wanted to average.
Sure.
There's a formula to doing that as well, right? And it's a bit philosophical because you really don't always know how much time it's going to take, but you've done it enough. And after you've done it thousands of times, now you can get pretty darn close. But for me to go out and provide an advisory service, right? Or somebody on my team, that's where the philosophical point gets, right? I know what I would like to make an hour. Challenge is figuring out what it's going to cost. How long is it going to take to do a business plan? You don't really know until you sit down and talk to the owner, right? So I think the key for me or my advice is figure out where you want to be from a cost per hour. You want to be $50 an hour, you want to be $1,000 an hour. So you use that kind of as a benchmark. And then you go out and you get your first job. And so the business plan takes you 3 hours to do.
Sure.
Whatever. So now you don't give the customer the amount per hour. I don't price it per hour. I give them a lump.
Okay.
If I finish it quicker, I win. If it takes me longer, they win. So there's give and take. And after you do a few of them, you start getting the idea of how long it's going to take to do a business plan. Same thing with the cash flow. Down figure out what your time is worth, really is probably a better way of saying that. It's not what you want to make. What is your time worth?
Sure.
And then you estimate how long it's going to take, multiply times your worth. And now you got a lump sum and you go do it. Sometimes you're going to win. Sometimes you're going to lose. But after you do enough of them, you start figuring out what it's going to take to do it. And you don't be afraid to tweak the numbers, right? Even for a bookkeeper, don't be afraid to tweak the numbers. But you may not be able to do it for that customer, but you can do it for the next one. So you just got to sit down, going back to the process again, right? You sit down and figure out what your time is worth or how much from a bookkeeping point of view, because I don't do all the bookkeeping. I pay somebody to do some of the bookkeeping. So I know what I want to make out of it. I know what I'm going to pay them. And then you figure out what it's going to take to do the work. That would be my best advice. If you're starting from zero, you make a few assumptions, figure out what your time is worth, and then you monitor it and you tweak it as you go along. You're going to win a few, you're going to lose a few, probably going to lose more up front than you win. But after a bit, you'll start seeing where things really line up and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And you brought something up that I think is, at least for me, always stumped me. And I think of changing prices and changing rates and adjusting to get to where I want to be. And there was a price or an income at which I started an LLC. And then there was an income at which we hit that my team was like, okay, it makes sense to start looking at an S Corp now because you've grown and the benefits will get better for you if you do this S Corp thing. And so we did that. And I was like, okay, great. But for me, it's always been confusing. And I'm curious if you have any insights on, is there a number that you should hit personally before you start bringing on employees or before you start bringing on other people to do the work? Because obviously, if you want to make the same amount of money every hour, and then you've got to start giving some of that money to other people, it then cuts into your personal income. And it just has always been one of those confusing sort of math problems for me to try to figure out if there's a target number to hit to make a hire or to bring on that next employee. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
That's another interesting question. And for me, there's really not a magic number.
Okay.
Goes back to your business plan and to your forecast and all that stuff, right? If you do them properly, and let's say you do a business plan and you hit a home run and you're growing it, pick a number, 15% per year. You're 5 years into this thing and you've grown it 15% per year. Are you offering the same service you did when you started? Are you able to provide the customer with what they need as you started? How much time are you spending working in the business versus on the business? For me, that's really the key. It's not really a number. I talked to a guy about 2 weeks ago. Interesting conversation. He has a manufacturing business. He wants to grow. Been in business for 9 years, I think. He's been relatively successful. He started with zero and he's not huge, but he's had a pretty regular growth way across the 9 years. Never gone down. It's always grown. And he's come to the realization that he can't grow anymore because he is the business.
Yeah.
That tells me two things. He's working too much in the business, not on the business. And he has done a crappy job of training somebody, training probably not the right word, passing on his knowledge, what needs to happen in that business so that he has somebody in the business that understands the business, maybe not as well as he does, but has a good enough understanding where he can back out and start growing. He needs to have his hands on the throttle. And this goes back to where the numbers need to be visible and accurate, because that's how he's going to tell whether the guys that he has passed this knowledge on to is work. For me, it's not really a number. It's about how much you're working in the business. And if you're spending too much time in the business, you need to come up with a plan on how to get out of that and work.
Yeah. And I think that's something that as a founder myself, I am constantly trying to figure out. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. There's other folks that are battling that same sort of dilemma, which is how do you get out of working in it and how do you start working on it and bringing folks in that really get the vision, that they have the buy-in to want to grow the business just as much as you do. And that's not always easy to find. So I think that's a challenge for a lot of folks.
It's harder to find these days than it used to be. But go back to the example I gave on the project. Once we got these guys engaged, it was unbelievable what they brought to us.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, is finding people that you can get engaged in the business and enjoy being in the business and want to learn the business and stuff like that. I'm making promises that you can't keep. If you find somebody, ask me what I was doing with certain people that I had hired that I was bringing up there. You're bringing them up too fast. No, I'm trying to find the next leader. And if they can't make it, then they can't. And so you're going to make a few mistakes here and there. I'm going to stump your toe. For a business to grow, you have to do that. And it is a bit of a sacrifice, Chelsea. You're exactly right. You go hire somebody, it's going to take a bit of the profit away. You got to think about it long term. You can't have a short-term vision. You didn't start the business to stay status quo necessarily. Start it, grow. So you got to have that long-term vision.
And I think that's a great point to wrap up on here, is having that long-term vision and planning ahead and giving yourself the time and the mental energy and just the effort of going through and putting together a plan and getting your finances in order and taking those into consideration up front. And I think that this has been a fantastic conversation. Folks out there that are just getting started, and probably even folks that have been around for a while, are going to get a lot of value out of this. So I really appreciate you being on the show today, bud. For folks that want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you, and how can they find you and talk to you about more of this stuff?
So my website is www.mcmay.biz, B-I-Z. All my contacts are there. I think that's probably the best way. They'll get an idea of what we do and how we do it by looking at the website. There's a form on it they can fill out, and it'll come direct to me. There is a telephone number on it, and there is an email on the website that will come direct to me. I think that's the easiest way, Chelsea.
Sure. And we'll get that link in the show notes for folks that want to track and follow up.
And I do an hour discovery call on me. They just want to have a conversation. This is kind of my passion. I love helping small businesses. They get an hour for free. So give me a call and be more than glad to talk to them.
And I'm sure lots of folks are going to get that set up as soon as we get this episode published and those show notes out there for them to be able to follow up and track with. Again, I appreciate you being on the show today, bud. Great conversation. Really appreciate your time. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.
You too, Chelsea. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening this week to GovCon Unscripted. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, get this podcast in your friends' ear holes, and do your part. Leave a heart. Leave a comment on any of the Spotify episodes. We'll get back to you. And I think you can do that in Apple too. And don't forget to subscribe to YouTube to get these live video episodes to your feed next week. And don't forget to tune in next week to the next episode of GovCon Unscripted. Thanks all.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.